what I think about Europe in 2018. Uh, if you saw my introduction video, that you know that I am from Hungary, Budapest, and I lived the majority of my life in Europe. I also lived a very little in the U.S. in New York, but that will be a different discussion, a different video. What I think about the U.S. So now I will talk about what I think about Europe. The way I see is Europe is in big trouble, and this is something that started a long time ago. Uh, Europe used to be the dominant continent of all. If you look at historically, Europe used to be the aggressor superpower who uh, ran around the world and conquered old lands, even if there were an owner there or not. If there were an owner there, then Europe enslaved them and exploited their resources, took home their resources, uh, and pretty much if you look at all the European countries, each and every European country has this in their past. In different times, just quite recently, I think England was the dominant superpower, but before that, these were, going around and around which country used to dominate. So Europe is like a huge fighting battle pit where nations are super aggressors and they want to conquer everyone on planet Earth. So that's basically, and then you can add religion to it, uh, and so Europe used to be this super aggressor superpower, and that competition also resulted major advances in many different fields, including religion and science and art, um, and in the 20th century, after two world wars, when Europe basically destroyed itself completely, bombed Europe itself to the ground, um, Europe decided that, which is a very interesting turn, Europe decided to stop being violent and aggressive, and Europe decided that it's time to be uh, uh, benevolent. Aggression is just not the answer, and Europe started to become. I think that's also about the same time when Europe also started to adopt the political correctness, and we started to think of ourselves as an evolved humans, where because we used to be animals where we were running around, basically uh, raping and exploiting the whole world. But that's the past, and we evolved, and now we are just an intellectual people with polite manners and super smart thoughts. And we are living in our ivory tower, so we don't have to be that aggressor anymore. That's the past, and we're not the past. We are the present and the future. So we are just peaceful. That's it. And so that's Europe in the 2020. That's the history of Europe for thousands of years. Europe was dominating the whole world, and then in the 20th century, after two world wars, when everything went south and Europe just messed up, all like millions of people, tens of millions of people died, etc. Resources, when cities were bombed to the ground. After that, Europe just decided, okay, that's enough. We evolved beyond. We are beyond that. We are not. We are just smart people, and we don't need aggression anymore. And I have some argue with that. I have to argue with that, and I completely disagree. By the way, I definitely believe. And so, first of all, Europe has a expected collective uh, regret and shame. It is expected from Europe. I don't know whether it's self-implied or it comes from the outside, but Europe definitely has this self-regret where when Europe think of itself as a wrongdoer of history, is the bad boy of history. So now, Europe feels that it has to feel shame about this, and probably that's part of the reason why Europe decided to give up all his efforts to dominate the world. So if you look at the European army, I mean, obviously European army used to be world class, the best in the world, and today most people in Europe not even sure that Europe could defend itself from any of the superpowers, China, America, or Russia. Yeah. So we definitely gave up our efforts to become the bully. We used to be the bully, a very successful bully, because in this world, if you are a bully, then you are successful. You can argue with that, but this is pretty much the experience that you see. That's why it's a very interesting question. I just asked one friend of mine who just had a kid 1 or 2 years ago whether you will raise your kid as a successful bully or as a as a unsuccessful good person, good people. And That's a tough question because you don't want your kid to grow up an asshole, but yet at the same time you don't want your kid to suffer all his life because he is a failure, because he just obeys and he follows. So that's a tough question to answer. Um, so okay, let's go back to my story about Europe. I was sidetracked about this. So Europe used to be this superpower, and it's not anymore. It gave up his motivation to become the superpower, even though we have some pretty significant economy strength, which is usually the foundation of any war. But our intentions are not about being aggressive at all. And this is pretty much the downfall of Europe, if you ask me. It's pretty clear that this is not helping the continent, but actually it's just going to a way where the rest of the participants won't take you seriously. And the way I look at it is that also you don't ever forget that each and everything in this life, it doesn't matter if it's a person or a country or a culture, has its very simple life cycle. There is no exception to that. So nothing is for the eternity. Nothing. Everything lasts only for a period of time, and then it ends. And there's nothing in this world which can last forever. And because of this, that's also true for empires and cultures. So I'm not really surprised that Europe, when it's going on that way. I mean, Europe had his time, hundreds of years, when Europe was dominating the whole world, and that was Europe's top period. And after that, what comes down? I mean, okay, let's go back to my original thought. So the typical life cycle is pretty simple. It's like at the beginning, you're born, you grow, you learn. You become more powerful if you're doing things right, and then you will peak at some point, and you will have some time at the peak, and after the peak you will just start to degrade. Whether it's the pace of the degrade can be fast or slow, it depends on the size and many other factors, but basically, and that's after you degrade, you die. So that's the life cycle of everything in this world, and that includes empires as well. So if you look at all the history, all the great empires, they had their exact same life cycle. So there is no exception to that. So again, Europe is had its peak time, had its peak centuries, and now it's going down. And the interesting thing is why it's doing it intentionally, because it looks like Europe still has an option to dominate, but it just decides not to. And this is a very interesting question. What's the reason behind it? Like, who makes these decisions? Who would decide that survival is not the single most important thing in this world? Because that's what happens in Europe. And also, it's very interesting when I have this argument with people who are agreeing with Europe that who think themselves as more evolved than just being an aggressor. Because I always had this discussion. I love those discussions when when I meet some people and who are representing this idea that we as humans, and especially as Europeans, we evolved, and we're not that animal anymore. We are just nice, polite people, and who don't want to hurt anybody, and who just want to have fun. And I cannot ever really logically accept that concept, simply because my theory of nature is that every single living organism is here to compete and fight with each other. Um, and I mean, this is not something I made up. If you look at the nature, that's basically the mechanism. That's the inherent mechanism of nature. If you go to nature, one animal, or one, not even just animals, even plants, they try to consume each other. That's how they get that's how they get their energy, and that's how they can survive. So Europe is going down on this path now, and it's not something I can agree with, and it's still questionable why is that. But again, so this theory that we evolved, I'm sorry, I'm going back to where I was. So this theory that you can evolve beyond being an animal only works if within the zoo all the rest of the animals agree with you. Like they will think the same. If they think the same, so if you have 10 animals, okay, if you're a lion, okay, you're the king, you're the king of the jungle, you're the lion, you're the scariest animal in the zoo. There are other animals in the zoo, but you are the top of the food chain in the zoo. Let's assume that. Now, everyone will respect you and fear you because you are just the top of the food chain in that context. But as soon as the lion decides that he wants to go vegan and he doesn't want to go eat meat anymore, guess what's going to happen with that lion? I would assume that in the same day when this decision made, he will be eaten by the rest of the animals. That's life. You have to show power. If you stop showing power, people will come and get you, and animals and living things will come and get you. Another very good example is your immune system. This is very interesting that when I have this debate with a few friends of mine who definitely believe that we evolved to this superhuman, I just see how detached we are from reality and real life, and this is absolutely shocking to me. Because just because you're not going to war every single day, because you have a life, you have a job, you have a salary, you have a family, whatever, you go play tennis. Just because you not do this every single day, it doesn't mean that you're not part of nature. And what I mean by that is that even though you are consciously not participating in any fight, any competing fight in your life on a daily basis, but don't forget that your immune system does every single second. If you would give up your immune system, you will be dead in an hour or in a day, because your environment would consume you. Really, that bacteria, viruses, everything. It just your immune system is having a constant fight and battle to survive in this environment. And by the way, that's not surprisingly, that's exactly why modern medicine is going from the artificial pills toward those treatments where they try to strengthen our immune system, because that's your best defense. But it's your best defense because it's fighting all the time. By the way, that's also what we know, that your immune system will be as stronger as it fights more. That's how life works. So again, this theory that we evolved and we are just this peaceful human being who don't want to fight anymore, and we don't want to hurt anybody anymore. We don't want to even offend anyone. We just want to sit around and smile to each other. That's what Europe's representing as of today. Just doesn't work, because the whole world disagrees. Because as soon as the dominant superpower gives up his claim to the throne, the rest of the world will see an opportunity. They will not just sit around and smile as well. And so, okay, everyone is now happy. That's not happening. Even if in the group there is one participant who disagrees and also wants to dominate, because everybody wants to dominate, they will take it as the opportunity to take down that entity. And this, by the way, In many, many ways, this is happening in Europe. You can see as Europe is crumbling. You can see as Europe is collapsing culturally. And I know this is not a politically correct thing to discuss, because here comes that, oh my God. Okay, let that be a discussion for another video. But for example, the how you this is a very interesting topic of how you keep a culture consistent. And I'm not saying a culture should not change and it should not be influenced by other cultures. I would never say that, because I always believe that you have to have inspiration, you have to have input from the outside, and you have to deal with anything that's coming from the outside. If you can't deal with it, then you can die. It doesn't matter. You're going to die. So you have to learn how to adapt. You have to learn how to change. This is absolutely necessary. But the extent is very, very, very important. So you can't have you can't. So the change is not organic, and the size of the change is just too big. Then it will not change that culture, but it will destroy it. And this is something that you can see in Europe. You can definitely see it in most. And by the way, you can see this in those countries in Europe who are just representing this super friendly, super polite, super evolved human concept the most. They are the ones that they are falling first. That's how it looks like. And by the way, so these are not even like my supervision or my predictions. These are something that you can see every single day if you can read the news, what's going on in the world. So again, this is how Europe stands as of 2018. Europe is falling. An interesting question why Europe decides to fall, but it is happening. I don't know if there's a future for Europe. By the way, if you look at Europe used to be a superpower. It's still a power. But if you look at the world, no one really takes Europe seriously anymore because we don't have the proper military. We don't have the strength. We're not showing strength. On the other hand, America is doing exactly that. They're showing power. They're showing strength. And they are an aggressor superpower, and everybody respects them. America is the bully. And America is what Europe used to be, and that just works. Anyway, I mean there are very, very there are more to this, and there are a lot of interesting concepts behind these things. But anyway, so that's my thought about about Europe, and whether there's a future for Europe, we don't know. As we know it, as we knew Europe, most likely that's not going to happen. It will change significantly. There's a huge cultural war that takes place in Europe as of now. We'll see what Europe can do to this. Probably it can solve it. Probably it will. I mean, it's obviously it's going to change, but the level of change, the extent of the change, is still questionable, and we'll see. We'll see. By the way, this is also a very basic difference between political views and political parties, how they approach this. Some of them wants Europe to stay to truth to its root, and others say it doesn't matter. We should not care about that because life is life. It doesn't matter what culture we're talking about. So that's an interesting debate anyway. My personal opinion is that Europe should not act harmless. Europe should not give up his motive to dominate. But I'm just one single dude in the European Union. So who am I to voice my opinion? I'm not even close influencing these things. These are way bigger things that we can imagine. So anyway, in short, 2018 Europe is going down, and we'll see how long it goes and what's going to happen. If Europe is about to change his attitude, we don't know that. That's really up to the future. Okay, that's it, guys. See ya.